Thank you, David. And we are going to fly through it. I mean, when David and I got together to put this session together, we did think about something slow and methodical, focusing on just one part of what we do at the Ministry of Justice. But we thought that might not be the best thing to do. We thought we'd give you fast and furious and the whole scope of what we do. So hang on to your seats. It will be fast, it will be furious, but we're going to try and leave some time for questions as well. Okay? Good to go? Excellent. I'm seeing enough nods. So, it first appeared in the workforce plan some 2 and a bit years ago, but the civil service, as you will have heard, and some of you will know, has declared publicly a pledge to be or to become the most inclusive UK employer by the year 2020, whatever that means. Following up on that pledge, do come in. Hello. We'll cut it out, the video. Seamless it will be. Thank you. So following up on that declared pledge to be the most inclusive employer by the year 2020 in the UK, what we have is, in support of that, a diversity and inclusion strategy launched in October 2017. It fueled my excitement, my personal excitement, because for the first time in my career, what I was looking at was a declared and published strategy that not only talked about representation, that not only referred to inclusion, but up front included something around accountability, something around transparency. In fact, last month, we're into November now, last month I celebrated 35 years as a civil servant. I do like to pause at that point because I'm hoping, thank you very much, that skill's still working. Thank you very much. I can see 1, 2, 3, 4 of you are thinking, oh my goodness, did he say 35 years? He looks absolutely wonderful. I can feel it. It's good. It's good. And I'm also shy. So what we have in this plan, in this strategy, is something around representation, inclusion, and indeed transparency and accountability. I'm excited by that. I'm excited at the prospect of putting our people front and center to help us drive towards that goal, that aim of being the most inclusive employer by the year 2020. But I also know, and I'm reminded what Peter Drucker says, that culture eats strategy for breakfast. I think he goes on to say lunch and dinner too. And so unless the people buy into it, unless the people are part of that, unless we win hearts and minds, it makes no never mind. It won't happen. So what we did at the Ministry of Justice, and this will really be a potted history, is we took a hold of that pledge. We wanted to make sense of it. And leading on from what our Chief People Officer, Rupert McNeil, said this morning, we wanted to convert that theory, that promise, into real action. Leading on from what McGregor Smith says in her report, we wanted to stop all the talking and start with some of the doing, some of the action. So we put on an event. We invited 80 of our senior leaders to number 1 Vic Street, part of Bays, another government department. It was on the 18th of September 2015. And we got 6 members of staff, 6 black members of staff, to share their experience, their stories of their time in the Ministry of Justice. Having invited our permanent secretary, new to the organisation at the time, Richard Heaton, he came to us from the Cabinet Office. He's also the civil service race champion. And further to what I heard a colleague saying in this room earlier, we took advantage of that combo. We took advantage of the fact that he was there to pay attention to those issues. So we asked Richard and other senior leaders to listen to those stories. One person got cold feet, but their story was narrated on the day and they were in the audience. And I'm here to tell you that on that day, a true milestone, there were tears, there was anger, there was a real feeling in that room that Richard was convicted by. He said aloud, "No longer on my watch." He rang his office, cleared the rest of his diary for the day, and he stayed to listen to what happened next. We had a facilitated session around microaggressions that was delivered by the fantastic Dr. Nicola Rollock, If you're not familiar, check her out, Dr. Nicola Rollock. She's written a book called The Colour of Class, but she's also gone on to write some more findings on this issue around microaggressions and what takes place. Perhaps a bit more about later. And so it was, the seed was sown, and months later, we came about Project Race. Strapline big, bold, and brave. Using the skills with the members of that team, we wanted to ensure that we tackled those issues head on. As with the quote from Richard, the observation I hear most often is that for a real difference to come about, our culture has to change. That is one of the things I hope this project tackles head on. And we took him at that. We took him at that word, and we sought to make sense of that. How did we approach it? Well, this is what we did. We sat down and thought about, with our years of experience in the organization, what is it we could do about this? Well, we wanted to start by normalizing the conversation about race. The 3 C's is a nod to the approach we use. We wanted to become competent, comfortable, and confident talking about race. We wanted to have facilitated discussions about white privilege, about white fragility, and this almost persistent obsession to frame every discussion around race by the cultural norm, by what people are telling us we needed to discuss and not discuss. We were that audacious. But we also wanted to give space to have people acknowledge the genesis of bias, where bias originates from, the amygdala at the back of the brain and the cognitive dissonance that kicks in when we are faced with perceived difference. So we were bringing it all into play in having those discussions. And I'm here to tell you, 2 years later, we've had nearly 83 conversations across the organization about that. And for sure, we've had pushback along the way. We've had some turbulence. We've had some people get up and walk out the room. We've had some people applaud and praise us, and unbalanced, more of that than the other. But we've had some real emotions, some real feelings expressed. And for how many of us in the room are serving civil servants? You will know when I say we're not terribly good at expressing our feelings at times. It's not the thing that we do around here. But as I think it's James Baldwin that says, not every problem that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed unless we face it. And that's the spirit of Project Race. That's what we've looked at doing. So as well as normalizing the conversation, we want race equality to become business as usual. We want it factored in up front proactively into what we seek to deliver. So great to hear that we've now got flow targets for BAME staff, Black, Asian, and minority ethnic. Great to hear that we've now got positive action schemes looking at delivering on race equality. It's a step in the right direction. But also, what we want to see is an investment in the intrinsic owners. What do I mean by that? Well, I say it like this. I want to see more of the underrepresented group in those decision-making spaces in our organization. I don't want to simply be consulted and then asked to leave the room when the actual decision is made. It's not good enough. It's not good enough. And so the tough message, as late in the day as it is, so forgive me if any fatigue has grabbed a hold, is to say opportunity is not being extended to all of us. Talent is everywhere. Talent is everywhere, but opportunity is not. What is it we are really doing to create a more reflective workforce? What are we really doing to make that happen? And so these are the questions that we're posing at Project Race. These are the conversations that we're having at Project Race. It's part of our strategic narrative. We want to look at where we're coming from. Where are we right now on the statistics? They are important. Empirical evidence is important. But we want to mix it with the anecdotal evidence. I think it's Brené Brown that says, stories are data. They're data with a soul. They're data with a soul. And they are a critical part of the evidence that points us in the right direction. And that's what we need to be including. Also, we want to engage with advocates, people who can stand up for this approach, this strategy, this way forward. And I'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. We call them our race champions and indeed our race ambassadors. But we want to amplify those relevant voices, not just give a platform to, but we want to turn them up. We want to get the volume even louder. Remember the 3 C's about being competent, comfortable, and confident as we do that. So we've got a series of blogs, articles. We've got a regular newsletter called B3, which is a nod to our strapline being big, bold, and brave. And we run events. We run events throughout the year. We've also got a Twitter account at Project Race UK. And throughout the month of November, we are going to issue every day some of our insights that we've collected from those 83 conversations that we've had thus far, along 7 game-changing principles. And we'll be issuing that out into the organisation and beyond. And finally, integrity. Integrity, to actually say what we mean and mean what we say as we travel. Some of you, perhaps who have worked in employee engagement, will recognise the strategic narrative, the engaging advocates, the amplifying the employee voice, and integrity as the 4 key enablers of employee engagement. That's no coincidence. We've modelled ourselves on that principle too. So what then is Project Race here to do? Well, very quickly, I did say it was fast and furious. We've got 4 high-level objectives, and they are these. We want to support delivery of the MOJ's published flow targets. We are here, Project Race, as a corporate initiative. We report into the Permanent Secretary. We're here to make the MOJ brilliant. Because what we recognise is we can't be the most inclusive employer by any year if we don't unlock the talent that there is amongst our BAME community. It simply isn't good enough to have a room full of well-meaning white people deciding what happens to black people. I make no apology about the binary narrative there. I want to make the point. I want to underline it. It's no longer appropriate. Indeed, it is offensive when we know that the BAME talent is there. What we have to do is create more innovative ways of pulling those people into those decision-making spaces. So we have success profiles, so we have strengths-based interviewing, and we have other ways of identifying the talent. I want to see mentoring go beyond mentoring of underrepresented groups. I want to see some sponsorship of those underrepresented groups. And it wasn't until I recently joined the Future Leadership Scheme that I recognized that sponsoring is not about running a long distance and asking everyone for a quid. It's actually about people who will speak up on your behalf when you're not in the room. It's actually about people saying, I think Rob would be good for that role. Or I think Bernadette Thompson would be good for that role. Or I think Sean Scantlebury would be good for that role. Because they possess the skills and the talent and the ability to deliver. But you see, the difference is that when you're sponsoring, you invest a part of your own reputation in that person. And again, further to what I heard a colleague saying earlier today, we recruit in our own image oftentimes. So we have to move away from that practice. Wrestle with it if we must. But Project Race is here to shine a light on that nepotistic tradition that has caused us to be where we are. You see, if osmosis was going to heal us, it would have healed us by now. It would have done that by now. We have to engineer a better way. And we will, because we can. We're that good. But we have to do it together. And so, I want to take us through the fact that we're concentrating on recruitment, retention, and progression. There's a lot more that we could say on those questions. But I want to hand over to David, who's going to talk a bit about race ambassadors.
Thank you. Right. Rob likes to talk. I'm going to go through this in about a minute and a half because we've only got 5 minutes left of the session. I knew this was coming. So in February 2017, we set up the Race Ambassador Scheme. By we, I mean Rob and the rest of the Project Race team. This was the first of its kind across government. One of the quotes I've got from our first speaker this morning, imposing targets from above is not going to be successful, was what Rupert McNeil said this morning. We need buy-in from senior leaders, but they can't make it happen. It has to happen at the ground level with that change of culture. And the whole point of the Race Ambassador Scheme is to have people at ground level across all the different areas, in this case the MOJ, to try and get those conversations happening, to hold people to account. But we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. There are loads of networks already out there, so we're collaborating with them. One of them is the Engagement Champions Network in the MOJ. There's 1,200 people in that. There are 55 race ambassadors. We cannot cover an organization of 70,000 people, so we need to plug into the people who already exist. And we need to get data out of them, because we're government, we like data. That's what we rely on. And so that's why we collect that data via things like the Project Race Pulse survey, so that we can turn round to the department and influence the departmental strategy. The request for regional events. We're very London-centric, which is slightly, given that we're standing in London while we say this, but that is the nature of the civil service. So we took the evidence from across the country saying, come to us more, and that's what we did. We're also looking to expand not just throughout the MOJ and the MOJ's family, but also across other parts of the civil service. We've had conversations with MOD. DEFRA has set up its own Project Race. And I know a few people here were at the launch of that a couple of months back. They have a very different landscape to MOJ. They have around 2,500 employees. They have a strategy. We have 70,000. We can't have a strategy to cover that. We're the oil to grease the machine, whereas they have a full-on strategy. Also working with BAYS, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, education, and the NHS. And it's all about that collaborative approach. We've got our race ambassadors across the whole country, setting them up in regional hubs where they can host events, so that it's not the same people all the time having to zip all over the country. Unfortunately, there is only one Rob Neal. Fortunately, there is only one Rob Neal. I don't think the world could handle more than one of him. But he can't be everywhere at once. So we need people, we need to train our own people to be able to do the delivery, to be able to take the message, to push the agenda of race equality. This carried on with our second cohort of race ambassadors when I became a race ambassador. And there's a bunch of them at the official launch. So that is Cohort 2, we're now switching our technique to going from having a recruitment of 30, a recruitment of 25, to having it as an ongoing recruitment so that you don't have to wait for that one-off occasion a year to apply, to get involved. If you get enthusiastic, if you want to be part of making the change happen, you can come along and do that tomorrow. You don't have to wait until next April, May, when we then have the next cohort, because we're doing away with that. There's lots of people here. Come and play. It's fun. Presenting with him is fun. Come and play. Make a difference. Make the change happen. Because it's not going to happen unless we get energized about it and we make it work. A quote here from an anthropologist called Margaret Mead. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever does. Yep. That's why we have race ambassadors, and that's why I'm going to hand over to Rob.
Oh, I think we're over. I think we are. Jordan, is there time for questions?
Yep, absolutely. So thanks so much for that.